At the moment, in some of the emerging market economies that you see, it's like borrowing money abroad, except that you don't have to pay it. So you're depleting your wealth, inject it into the economy, and that's exactly what Ahmadinejad did. And what's interesting enough is that in the new administration under President Rouhani, the Minister of Economic Affairs and Finance made a comparison. He said, you know, when they talked to him about what have you inherited from the administration of Ahmadinejad, and they said, we have a big mess here. And then he said, and I have the quotation with me, that this is not the first time in our history that this mistake happened. The Shah did the same. Now, what was that mistake? He tried to put the oil money on the tables of the people. I beg to differ, because the policies were entirely different, and I'll be happy to explain them to you. But I like us to have plenty of time for discussion. But to finish the oil story, when I was a student at high school, at that time I didn't know Mr. Zahedi. I only got to know him back in England almost 60 years ago. But in Iran, a book had been written by a lawyer called Abul Fazl al-Lisani. It started in 1950 as a series of articles, and then it was put together in a book called Talay Siyah Ya Balay Iran, The Black Gold or the Curse of Iran. Recently, in a very outstanding article, if I may say so, that I like to suggest to you to read, I read a paper by Dr. Pesaran and Dr. Mohaddis, December 2012. It's called 100 Years of Oil Income, a Curse or a Blessing. The curse reminded me of that book I had read, or at least tried to read, back in 1950 in Iran. Is it a curse or is it a blessing? The answer is that how you spend it. Now, how did the Shah spend it in the 60s and the 70s? And we can come to today's Iran, if you like, and see how did they spend it. And then I'll be happy to elaborate the difference. But at the time of the Shah, in the 1960s, the oil income went by increments. And in my view, again, without having much evidence except the result, it was in line with the absorptive capacity of the economy. There is so much you can absorb. In Istanbul, recently they discovered you cannot construct 100 shopping malls in one small half a generation and don't expect something to happen to your lira. It did happen. It would have been very easy to forecast that. And I can explain that too if you wish. But basically, you have to have the absorption in the economy to absorb this money spent, because the government spends it. And that's the catch. And as a central banker, I regret to say it, but in an oil economy, especially in a high populated economy, and the emphasis on high populated because I can explain that too, you can guess it, the dominant party in the economic policy is fiscal. If you get the fiscal right, that means you got the oil money spent well. If you get the fiscal wrong, you're going to miss the boat. In the 60s in Iran, we got the fiscal right. In the 70s in Iran, we got the fiscal wrong.
Can you tell us about what fiscal means?
Pardon me?
Can you tell us what fiscal means?
The budget of the government, the fiscal policy, what the government puts in its budget. Now, When the income of the government is not generated by taxes, therefore you're not extracting anything from the economy while you're spending this money into it. Liquidity in Iran today, in the last few years, has been growing at 30 to 40% per annum. There is nothing the central bank can do to absorb that kind of liquidity. No way. In any event, fiscal policy and monetary policy have to be coordinated. You can't have, if you saw America coming out of the recession in the United States, after the 2006-2008 recession, because fiscal was stimulating the economy, so was monetary policy, expanding it, lowering the interest rates, and making money cheap, which has continued so far. So, what happens, and is there any relationship between absorptive capacity, fiscal policy, consequences thereof, and the revolution? Let me explain how, in my view, the linkage worked there. And while